Welcome to Stir and Tell, the podcast from the David James Group. My name is Chris Martin. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations and Social Media for the agency. In this episode, Managing Director Ron Zywicki and I explore the similarities and differences between nonprofit organizations and for-profit companies. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks, Chris. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you.
This is an interesting topic. I mean, a lot of our topics focus on the actual work we do, branding, PR, social media events, but this is more conceptual, more mile-high type of stuff. So that's why we invited you to this podcast, because you're the biggest, deepest thinker in the agency.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So full disclosure, most of our clients are nonprofit associations, correct, Ron?
Yep.
So we have accumulated a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, a lot of cultural learnings from our work with associations over the years, but we also do some for-profit work. We get interest from some companies. We have a lot of expertise in branding, especially in marketing, digital skills, and things like that, things that for-profit companies, of course, can use. So they do seek us out occasionally. Mm-hmm. And occasionally people will say, well, most of the work you do is with associations. How is that going to help me? How does that play out in my market? So how do we kind of address that?
Well, I think the big answer is that whether it's a for-profit company or a nonprofit association, the challenges that they're coming to us to help them solve are similar. For example, you mentioned branding. Well, fundamentally, the work that we do, the prep that we do, our process for branding is applicable to both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. The background research we do, the brand position work that we do, the competitive analysis, all of that can be applied to either type of organization. There's really not a lot of difference there.
One of the things I've noticed over the years is this myth that for-profit companies are very ROI driven, which is true, but many people think that associations or nonprofit groups are not ROI driven, and we've found that that's not true.
Right.
The ROI is different, certainly, but associations do care about how their budgets are invested, and increasingly they want and ask for detailed reports and metrics on how their dollars are being invested, how they're doing.
Absolutely. I think one of the areas that we've seen over the years, one slight difference, but it does come back together, is when we talk about for-profit companies. A lot of the engagements might be around maybe it's a product launch or general marketing of their organization, whatever it might be. Oftentimes, a big component of those engagements are lead generation needs. So how many leads can you get? How many leads can you put in the pipeline to get them to our sales people? Now, traditionally, a nonprofit or an association, we don't really hear it in that way. How many leads are we generating? But it is the same thing when you think about it from a member. Let's look at member acquisition. At its core, a member acquisition programming, it really is a lead generation approach, because what you're doing is you're building awareness of your organization, you're nurturing the pipeline. It takes time to introduce the organization and communicate how an association's need or offerings match up to those needs of that potential member. It's the same thing in a lead generation program. You've got a business-to-business company who has something to sell. It's a product or a service or a solution, but it's fundamentally the same. They have to communicate or first introduce themselves, make themselves the audience aware of who they are and what they offer. You need to build a relationship. You have to start conversations, nurture those leads. So different types of way of coming at the same process, but you're absolutely right. The smart associations today are really looking more at introducing a measurement component to any of their marketing efforts that they really need to be. And if that's not part of the approach when developing a marketing plan, it really does need to be, because you're investing dollars. You have to answer to your volunteer board. You need to answer to your internal stakeholders, whether it's your executive director or a director of a program perhaps you're servicing. Yeah, measurement and thinking of that way in ROI is critical.
Oh, clearly we see with social media ad programs that we do, for instance, on Facebook, we're able to provide lead generation there where we're actually showing that the ads go right to the page where the people need to register, and we're capturing those metrics for them. So they know exactly how much they paid. They know exactly how much each link click cost them, and they can make a judgment going forward for the next year or even within that campaign, where to put their dollars for the next iteration or the next part of the campaign too. So in that case, they're identical.
Yeah.
There's really not a lot of difference.
Yeah, I think that's one of those exciting things. You've got this tool that everybody's familiar with, whether it's a Facebook, a social media, or a LinkedIn, or a Twitter, or Instagram. Associations, B2B, everyone's familiar with these tools. The ability to use those tools to start introducing, particularly to an association who may not have thought in those terms, lead generation. But that type of tool helps transition into that mindset very easily because, you can show the results. Everyone's familiar with it. It's exciting.
What about the cultural differences between for-profit companies and associations? I think there may be some significant differences that we need to be aware of and people need to be sensitive about. But we do get that sort of pushback from for-profit companies that feel that that if we work for an association, it's not as cut and dried or it's not as serious as a for-profit company, because they're trying to work with customers and they're selling things and they really need to demonstrate that. And that turns, I think that leads to, in some cases, a faster moving sort of culture or environment, maybe quicker decision making. Yeah. And associations, they're typically made up of members or member companies. So there's a lot of input. Yeah. There's a lot of committee work. It's more methodical. Right. Associations don't want to necessarily get ahead of their members. So we have to understand that, right?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest differences, and you touched on this, is the speed of decision making and those who are involved with a decision. Typically, when we do work with a for-profit organization, the timelines that we assign to a project, depending on what it is, but a lot of times they do need to be a little bit more accelerated, a little more aggressive. When we present creative or a plan, the feedback generally we'll receive and any decisions made seem to be a little quicker with for-profit. They do just move at a little different type of speed. And again, typically with the for-profit organization, let's say they have a marketing department, which associations have as well. But depending on the company, in a for-profit, generally the decisions that are made affecting marketing or public relations are able to be made generally within that department. They're empowered to do so. Usually you're not going up to another level, like the C-suite to get approval on certain things. They're empowered to do so. I think what we find with associations, there tends to be a little more involvement of departments outside of the marketing function. A lot of executive director input, is involved, and that's great because it's how associations work. They just tend to be a little bit more transactional in that way. They work across department, at least from a decision-making process. And then, of course, with the associations, let's say we're doing either a new brand or a big marketing campaign. A lot of times, as you know, the first step is to present or discuss or make decisions with the internal folks, the staff people. Then there's always the step to go to the membership. Not always, but generally there's a committee or something that has to weigh in on the decision making. With a for-profit, you really don't have that second step. You're working a little closer with the marketing staff. They're making the decisions. You're moving forward.
I've noticed in PR over the last 5 years that associations are investing a little bit more in PR and social media, and for-profit companies are investing a little less in PR and probably more in social and digital. There was a very interesting article done, I think, in the Washington Post a year or so ago, where a writer tried to do positive feature stories on a random group of Fortune 500 companies. And he contacted all the companies and basically said, hey, I want to do a feature story on your company. Mm-hmm. And a significant percentage of the companies did not have anybody to tend to his request and work with the reporter and arrange interviews, provide background information, the nuts and bolts of what we do, really. And that sort of heralded this sort of examination by the profession about this kind of trend and whether or not it was a sort of fundamental shift in dollars and emphasis by for-profit companies away from PR. The trend has now gone from 10 years ago when people looked at social media, the notion was, well, we're still doing PR. We're still trying to get the media to do our stories. And now it's come almost full circle where the for-profit companies are their own media, being their own media, and they're not relying on other media to do their stories. And the result of that has been that some of them in part have abandoned traditional PR in total, which is a fascinating shift and will have a lot of repercussions going forward and long term, I think, as we sort these things out. But on the association side, I don't see that as much.
Well, I suspect, let's think about it this way, right? Corporations are, both types of organizations have missions. They have mission statements, they have vision statements. A corporation, generally, the mission is developed around offering some type of good or service to a consumer, right? And there's a ROI component. There's how it affects their earnings and really more financially driven. Whereas an association, they're literally mission driven. They have some type of well-defined mission that is more about impacting an industry or guiding an industry or advocating on behalf of an industry or an area, healthcare or technology, whatever it might be. So they have a mission. They have a drive to communicate and to persuade and to get a message out on behalf of their membership. So to me, it makes logical sense that they are starting to get more sophisticated in the PR space. Not that they haven't always been, but it's becoming more of a marketing part of the marketing mix. And embracing that and social media to really build a bigger voice out there. They're not really being driven by how it's affecting the bottom line. I know if that's your experience.
It is, yeah. It's a nice summary of what I believe is happening too. So that's very interesting. So learning the lessons of for-profit marketing and branding and PR and social media, how do you take some of those lessons learned and best case scenarios and bring them to association or nonprofit clients?
Well, I think, that's one of the things that as an agency, we've always pointed to is that we do have this history of both association, nonprofit marketing, and experience in the business-to-business world. We have staff people here who have worked for associations. We have staff people who have worked, in corporate settings. We have staff people that even work for consumer types of companies. We're able to take this diverse experience and use it to go to our association clients and start those conversations, or if they're not having or being happening, around the concept of lead generation or measurement or ROI, all these types of concepts that we've learned in our work on the B2B side, introducing them, injecting them into the strategy and the planning that we're doing for our clients, and just leverage that experience.
Do you think you'll see more of the blurring of these lines between for-profit companies and their goals and nonprofit associations in 2020, for instance?
Absolutely. Because, associations are really looking at the marketing function critically. they're understanding that as the demographics of their membership starts to shift. One common thing we hear across all of our clients is, an aging membership base. So they need to attract the next generation of members. Well, that takes marketing, and that takes, knowing today's marketing tools. So associations are really focusing on how to market successfully. And that even means they're bringing in their own directors of marketing who have experience in the for-profit world. So you're going to see that happening on their side. From our point of view, we want to continue to talk about measurement, talk about lead generation, ROI, bring these concepts into a nonprofit world because they make the effort stronger. Somebody's investing somebody else's money in all these cases. So you need to do right. You need to be a steward of those invested dollars, which requires a little more B2B sophisticated type approach. And the other thing I would say too is from a creative end, looking at the work that's being done, we want to see more creative that's inspired by the B2B or the consumer world, because at the end of the day, we're talking to people. So I think the approach to creativity and the campaigns that are being done are going to continue to draw more from the for-profit world.
Those are excellent points, and shows that the differences between the two are smaller than people might think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I would agree with that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining Stir and Tell, Ron. My name again is Chris Martin, Ron Zywicki, Managing Director of the David James Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.